all our webinars live on the HTSA website anyway, so people can go back and watch them. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the final webinar on co-design for our Spotlight series. My name is Agustina Gancia. I'm the lead for capacity building at HTSA, and I have been your host for this month, where we delved into co-design and all the different ways of doing it and the challenges and benefits, etc. So, can I click forward? There you go. Before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge the Ghana people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, which is where I am currently located. We recognize the Ghana people's cultural, spiritual, physical, and emotional connection with their land. We honor and pay our respects to Ghana elders, both past and present, and all generations of Ghana people now and into the future. And I know that both of our speakers are joining us from other areas. I would like to acknowledge the lands on which they are as well. And if anyone from the audience is joining us from other lands as well, please feel free to put that in the chat or the Q&A just to see where everyone is joining from. So just quickly, if there's any newcomers to the Spotlight series, I usually do a quick introduction, what this is, why we're here. The Spotlight series is an initiative that HTSA launched in 2021 as part of our capacity building portfolio, where we try to build the capacity and capability of South Australians or South Australian researchers in health research translation. And each Spotlight series delves into a different topic relating to research translation. So what are the key competencies that you need to actually do effective research translation? And co-design is one of them. So this is our 8th series. We've covered topics like implementation science, consumer and community involvement, creating research and policy partnerships, among others. Please visit our website if you'd like to know more. And besides webinars, we also link to other trainings that are available. We share online resources almost every day on our social media pages. We used to share on Twitter, but now we only share on LinkedIn. And we also share links to interesting publications, such as books, book chapters, journal articles. Who's Health Translation SA? So our organization is a NHMRC accredited academic health research translation center. And we offer a collaborative and cross-sectoral approach to research and the translation of evidence into patient care. So really, what we try to do is connect with our 11 partner organizations that span most of the healthcare delivery across South Australia. So it includes all the universities, PHNs, the government, SAMRI, which is where we sit, the CSIRO, and the Aboriginal Health Council of SA. And our vision is to accelerate the translation of research findings into action as quickly as possible to ensure that scientific evidence can actually positively impact the health of South Australians. And we act as an independent catalyst to broker all of these collaborations to address the major system changes. So we try to connect, the right people together, researchers to policymakers to health service directors, to really ensure that these things happen. And education and training is one of the ways that we try to raise awareness or build people's capacity on how to do this properly, and Spotlight series falls within the education and training bit of our work. So today we have two excellent and experienced presenters. We have Narelle Hinckley, who will begin, and Keith Stockman from Northern Health. First, Narelle is going to talk about the practical parts of co-design in healthcare and how she uses it in her current role at Tom Melbourne. And then Keith will present his insights from using design thinking in reforming health services at the Monash Medical Centre. So I'll quickly introduce both of our speakers before we delve into the presentations. Narelle is leveraging 15 years of experience in the healthcare sector. She stepped into the role of general manager at Tom Melbourne. And this new chapter builds upon her foundation in health transformation, service improvement, innovation, and project management, complemented by her expertise in occupational therapy. Then Keith has over 4 decades of experience in the healthcare sector. He's currently the Director of Service Design and Innovation in the Staying Well program, Hospital Without Walls Division at Northern Health in Victoria. And in a previous role at Monash Health, he was responsible for designing and implementing an innovative support model for patients at high risk of hospitalizations. So I would like to invite Narelle to share her screen and tell us a bit more about her presentation. So I'll stop sharing and I'll ask her to share.
Take myself off mute first, otherwise I'll get that wrong. I'm just going to do a portion of my screen. Oh, that's not going to work. Hang on. Can you see? Nope. Can you see that?
That works. Yeah, that's great.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to talk to you a bit. I know that everyone's probably familiar with the term co-design, but I wanted to sort of talk about the 2 different parts of co-design. So the co being the community and the design being the design bit. And obviously they're both really important, but neither has all. So everyone, there's multiple definitions and interpretations of co-design. But to me, co-design is really about bringing multiple perspectives together, whether that's lived experience, professional experience, etc., to solve a common problem or challenge. And it's about, for me, about elevating the opinion of the primary beneficiary of the service or the product or the solution. And I think for me, co-design really is about involving as many perspectives as appropriate or as possible within that process. Now, when I was thinking about this, I think that in health, a good example of perhaps a place we don't always do co-design really well is outpatient services and outpatient clinics. I personally think that they're a lot of the time designed for us as the health professional and the doctors, not for the patients and the consumers accessing the clinics. And we really need to think about flipping that, as well as thinking about the administrative support and other people who sometimes get forgotten about their perspective and their involvement in that process and what happens on a day-to-day basis. So the big one that I really want to sort of take away is it's designing with the people that it benefits, not for them. And we want to try to involve them across as many perspectives or parts of the process when we're both designing and implementing and refining a model. So I think if I could tell you one thing is no one size fits all approach to co-design. You'll get a lot of process, and even my next slide will look like a process, but you sort of have to trial and error that, and that's that real design process. Test it, what works, what doesn't work, and go again. So I think sometimes we forget about the iteration of co-design and that it needs to be quick and dirty and messy, and it requires multiple cycles. I think in health, we often say, oh, that didn't work, but we never go, what did we learn from it? And was it the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong challenge we're trying to redesign for? So I think it's really, we need to think about that when we're designing and doing co-design. And one of the things that I think is a bit of a thief of co-design is assumption. We should assume nothing and ask open-ended questions. So I didn't think I should go with the crass version of what assumption can sometimes be. But I think we really need to think about, oh, no, not saying, oh, that's what they want or what someone needs, actually asking them, because we do assume a lot of things, and particularly around metaphors and other things like that. So if I said to you, think of a flower, and picture it in your mind of what that is, I can probably assure you we all have slightly different flowers in our head, depending on what our favorite flower is. So it's about making sure that if someone uses a metaphor or they're using language, we really probe into that, and ask a lot of really inquisitive, open-ended questions. And I think that's really important. So I just wanted to sort of go over a little bit of co-design, or what I think, and how that works. And I think design's a really interesting part of that, or community or cooperation and design. I think sometimes we just want to do things without taking that conscious design process. So I'm going to flip to my next slide, because you're probably all going, but yeah, that's all great, Narelle, but how do we do it and what do we do? And so I'm going to talk about what we did with Monash Watch, which Keith and I were both involved in. So there may be a few of you on the call that have seen one of my slides before, but I'll try not to tell the same story. So in my current role, where we are, we sort of work through this design process a lot. So the empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. But I really want to emphasize it's not linear. So then when I look back at Monash Watch, we did this. And so we created design briefs and design criteria of what we were trying to design for, not what is at the moment, what do we want to go into. And we really had to think about identifying our challenge, and seeing if it really is the true challenge or issue, and working through that. And then we got into ideating and prototyping and testing. So we did a whole lot of stuff, and I'll talk through as much as I can in the allocated time slot, but we had to really think about empathizing with our patients, or our primary consumers, so patients and carers and their families. So I'll talk a bit more about that in one of my other slides. And we had to really see what the problem was from their perspective, not from the healthcare service. So we're very familiar with frequent flyers or regular presenters to hospital and that sort of terminology. But what does that actually mean from their perspective? What are their unmet needs, and why is this happening? So I think it's just really important to try to constantly ask it, of the patient and the beneficiary, and then trying to sort of work out and understand the problem, or what their problem is, versus what we think it might be. So we started Monash Watch with how might we improve the health of patients at home so they remain well, and as a consequence use less hospital. So that was our problem. That was what we were trying to do. That was the opportunity space we were in. And we created a design brief and a criteria of what success would look like for us around that. And then we probably did the bit that you're most interested in, is how do we engage with our patients, and how do we engage with our staff, and work through that. So I'll bring my favorite slide up next, which Keith definitely has seen, but I think it's about just designing with me and not for me. So I'll give multiple examples. When we're doing Monash Watch, we didn't look at someone's medical record. We went and did home visits, off the cuff, rang a few patients up and said, would you come and talk to us? Now, I'll put a caveat on that. We didn't use interpreters, which I think is limited in our design, because obviously people of non-English speaking background have different complexities in the system than people who speak English. So, you know, in an ideal world, we would have used interpreters with a large cohort. So we went out and interviewed 30 patients, myself and Damien, one of our other colleagues, and asked them what their challenges were and why they would come to hospital. We tried to understand their health. So we asked them about a good health day and a bad health day, and how had they been interacting with Monash Health, and what did good healthcare mean to them. We'd started to sort of formulate what we thought a solution would be. So we sort of asked a few little questions around what would solve that problem, or what did they think the solution was. Now, Keith and I were talking about this yesterday. One of the things sometimes when you try to ask someone what they want, they can't think of it. So we were talking about the iPhone yesterday, where if you told us we wanted a camera attached to our phone many years ago, we couldn't have perhaps conceptualized that. So sometimes it's about giving people the options or presenting them with different options and letting them interrogate those options and say, I like this because, I don't like this because, or no, you've totally got it wrong, and this is the situation. So I think this is really where open-ended questions come in. I think we're going to provide Judy Reese's Clean Language as a resource, but really about asking about metaphors and tell me what you mean by that flower and what does that look like? And, is it a bunch? Is it a single flower? And really going into that. So one of my slightly cantankerous interviews, the guy told us his healthcare was very colourful language. And so we literally, I suppose you say, parroted it back at him. Tell me more about why that colourful language is how you describe your health. And it really broke down the barriers for him of that judgment between professional and consumer. And he just let us know everything. So we interviewed the 30 patients. And then when we were back in the office, we went and looked at the medical record. As you can picture, the pictures are different. And you could see that our own healthcare bias was there around how we'd spoken about patients did not attend, left disgruntled out of an outpatient appointment and those things. The front story of that was I didn't attend because I was unwell. I rung the clinic and told them I couldn't attend, and they said they were going to reschedule and put that in. Or I left because I'd sat there for 5 hours and I hadn't had any food, and I smoke and I'm not allowed to smoke in an office in a hospital, or I couldn't get the last train home and I'm not very proficient in getting other forms of transport home. So I think it's really about diving into the not just the what, but the why, and really understanding why the behavior is as it is. And that for me is how we get into that designing with the person and not for them, and how we really work through that. So after we did all our interviews and those sort of things, we prototyped what we thought our Monash Watch service would look like. And we then brought a whole lot of consumers in to get their feedback and to really go into don't sugarcoat it for us. Tell us it now before we invest time and money into setting it up. And that feedback was really valuable. And we used storyboards and videos and of course, there's always sticky notes and post-it notes and butcher's paper and those are things, but really tried to understand and give people multiple opportunities to communicate what they saw as the challenges about accessing and being supported by the healthcare service. So we did that. A few weeks later, we did the same thing with the health service staff. We all can be pretty opinionated at times, and that was probably a harder session. And it had a lot more red on it in terms of people not being overly happy. And part of that is to do with the context we were working in and the boundary services. But our storyboards were probably the things that were most successful. So we talked about how the process would work, but in a visual way, which sounds ridiculous sometimes, but I think being visual beings and being able to sort of think about it. And we also tried not to defend anything we were doing. So, which is a little bit hard at times for me. Keith will no doubt agree with that. But we tried to sort of sit on our hands, close our mouth, and just let people absolutely go to town on what they thought was good, bad, and anything in between. So that was sort of the first part of our co-design, and then we went into pilot. And so with our pilot, we told our staff we're in pilot, tell us about things that are working, not working. We also told our patients what works, what doesn't work. We need your feedback regularly and those sort of things. And so we were constantly in this check, redesign, sort of iterate process. So I think sometimes we need to think about pilots being true pilots in healthcare and not being set and forget as per the plan, and being able to strongly sort of articulate, this is why we're changing this. This is the evidence that's emerging as we're doing the process. So for me, that's where that still that co-design really is not just a process, it's a mindset, it's a methodology, and you're sort of working iteratively through that process. Because I'm pretty sure if we all went back to the old iPhone, the first version, now we kind of can see how that changed over time, and they constantly looked for better. The context within you that you're within changes things. What works in one section of your organization or your demographic area may not work in another because of the differences in the local context of that area or the local community. So it's really about making sure that we make it individualized and change that process. So I'm hoping you'll remember our little cantankerous, excited little woman here giving us the rock on symbol, and try to think about, if you're designing it for your grandma or your sister or your child, what would they want? And actually ask them that, because it's often different than what we think. So don't assume it. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to flip to my last slide. So you're probably thinking, what am I up to now? I'm going to move my bottom of myself out of there. I didn't realize I was sitting there. What now? So I'm working at Tom Melbourne, and we're a small not-for-profit that create and build products that improve lives of people with a disability. So we create one-off solutions where there's no obvious solution in the market, and we focus on bringing or making assistive technology accessible and affordable. What does that mean? Why are you doing it, etc.? So we are trying to live and breathe co-design every day, and we have people with a disability involved in all of our events. They're involved in our boards. They're involved in designing our events and participating in them, and telling us what was good and bad, and everything in between. I put my little sprinkle silliness slide. This is one of Keith and I's little cartoons. I think I actually gave it to him when we finished with each other, so that he could put it on his wall. But I think one of the things we have to try to do is get some fun and some silliness into our everyday practice, and particularly in design. We're more creative when we're a bit silly. There's different literature around you're more creative when there's music on in big groups. There's things about sometimes when you're in that silly mood in the office, and I can think about it with Keith and Damien and I, as we're in a very small office with very little oxygen, so probably slightly delirious, but sometimes they were the times when we actually broke through our thinking and thought, well, what if we do that? And what if we try that? And how would that look? And so I like to put the sprinkler there, because I think you need to sprinkle it in from time to time. It's serious work in healthcare. And the subject can be pretty hard and tough going at times. So how can you bring some of that silly behavior in? One of the other things that we used to do to test our brains, Damien and I, is we used to walk in a different entrance every time or tried to get to the office a different way every time we went to the office on site at Monash, which anyone who's been there will know it is a bit of a rabbit warren. So there's a lot of different ways. But it also helped us to think about how hard it would be if you were coming into the building as a patient and you'd never come in that entrance before, etc. So that's sort of. So at the moment, what we're doing is we're doing events. So we do makeathon events where we have challenges for people with a disability that don't have they have an unmet challenge, and we're trying to find a solution for them. Hopefully the most exciting thing that we're going to do in the next, I'll give us 12 months to do it, but we're looking at taking one of our prototypes that has worked with a young boy who was having some challenges around using a communication book with his wheelchair, and we're hoping to actually do that wider so that we get a small revenue stream, but we can also increase our impact. So I suppose I'm sort of still working in the health space, but I've moved more into the disability, the not-for-profit sector. But I suppose the thing is with co-design, And the things that I learned with Monash Watch, and those are things that's constantly around, hang on, who are we doing the design for? Are we designing it for us, or are we designing it for the people that are participating and coming to our events? Now, one of the things I didn't say, and I know I'll be about to be wrapped up, is you've got your primary beneficiary, but don't forget your secondary beneficiaries or your other beneficiaries as well. So you want to elevate the voice of the person that's the primary person that's going to receive the service or the product or the solution, but you also want the perspectives of the other people that interact and work with that service and those sort of things. So I'm going to stop there because I just looked at my watch and I'm pretty sure I'm sitting at about 17 minutes.
Oh, that's great, Narelle. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I love some of the quotes that you said. The thief of co-design is assumption. It's so true. If you already have something set or a belief or something, it'll definitely stop the creativity, really stop the all the different options that are available.
Shall I stop sharing?
Yes, please. Yes. If anyone in the audience has any questions or comments, I'll invite you to put them in the chat or the Q&A so that we can go on to Keith's presentation, and then we can address all the questions and have a discussion afterwards if people want to ask questions. So Keith, I invite you to share your screen now and to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I might have started on the wrong slide. Okay, that's a good start. Can you hear me okay? Okay. First of all, I have to start by saying I do miss Narelle so much. She was an utter delight to work with, and we learned a lot of things together. So it was lovely to hear you talking about that, Narelle. And you've gone on to great things, which is wonderful. I ended up with a cheeky title, which is what co-design is not, which pretty much left it open for me to say anything I wanted, I think. But but there was a motivation which I'd like to share as a translation group interest. Way back, I did try and convince the translation precinct to put in a design lab with designers in it instead of researchers. They thought it was an absolutely stupid idea. Why would they do that? However, I have now seen that happen in various places around the world. So it's nice to know that you might eventually be right in life if you live long enough. All right. First of all, I have absolutely no question that co-design is a very good thing. And as I said, the time with Narelle doing that with patients was an absolute privilege to work with the patients and the staff that were there. But I have had a few concerns as I've sort of watched the healthcare sector adopt what it's calling co-design. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that and only scratch the surface probably, but just talk a little bit about why I've had those concerns. So first of all, I think there is a risk that co-design gets tacked onto what some have referred to as the traditional innovation funnel. So what the heck is the traditional innovation funnel? Well, this is taken from Lyric, the references down the bottom, but I just thought that the metaphor of an alligator was great because a lot of good ideas have been eaten by alligators. But ideas are beautiful things. You know, I got a scientific background. I love ideas. I just want to get them out there and see what happens. And you can fall in love with ideas. And I still see this going on in health. You know, we come up with an idea, someone gets excited, we win the local competition for our idea. We get told to search around a bit more to see what else other people are doing. And then we select what we want to do. And then someone wants to create a business plan so we can deal with the finances, and then we want to get on with it. And I've seen co-design, inverted commas, because as Narelle said, it has many definitions, being inserted in that select ideas thing. You know, let's talk to some people and see whether they think this is a good idea or not. And I think, as Lyric does, this is now a really quite out of date model. It has its place still, but we've seen things move on. So I think that maybe some of this risk of co-design not quite being fitted in the right way, it comes from maybe not necessarily invoking a complete picture of design. For some, it's a narrow view. For others, it's a very rich view. I don't question that. And I've seen some fantastic holistic co-design approach descriptions, but I've also seen it happening on the ground where it's not like that. So I want to talk a little bit about just a few insights that I've had that have stayed with me through my design discovery journey, which is still ongoing, by the way. I absolutely started as my life as a scientist. I had a very, very biased view of the world, none of which I realised at the time, but design has certainly broadened my thinking. My first engagement with design was picking up this book by Tim Brown from IDEO. A lot of people had that moment. This goes back many years now. And IDEO, it was basically an advertising brochure for IDEO, a company that was is still a huge design company in the US, and has done some very good work. One of their founders invented the mouse. We had a few influences at the beginning, and Augustina's got a few references to some books for us there, which you can have a look at, because we'll barely be able to describe anything. But Jean Liedtke was a big influence for Narelle and I. Jean's an absolute delight. She came to visit us. We ended up with some of our stuff, not just Monash Watch, but other things in a book she's published. And she gave us the beginnings of a framework to sort of what's the design process look like. And we really, at the beginning, we really did embrace design as a process, as a structured thing to follow. And we learned all about the double diamond, divergent, convergent talk approach to design. The squiggle down the bottom represents it far better. And we also learnt that, at least at the time, that our concept of co-design was probably about trying to go out and create persona or archetypical patients. But we quickly learnt that if things are complicated enough, you can't really make realistic personas. You actually have to really get a very wide number of people involved, because it's quite hard to classify them as personas. But nevertheless, the design industry was very into persona descriptions and then designing against that. The good thing was it absolutely was the beginning of co-design, and it absolutely started with what people need, want, desired, etc., and gave us a way to do that. But we soon realised there were limitations to some of that. We met this beautiful man, Harold Nelson, who I think we've also given you the reference for, Augustine. Design. Harold grew up in the so-called Berkeley bubble with some very famous people, which I haven't got time to describe, at the University of California. But he ended up writing, he's an architect. He ended up writing the book called The Design Way, which I would recommend to anyone with a bit of an academic bent who wants to get their head into design, because Harold is a design practitioner, but he's a design philosopher as well. And we started to realize there was a philosophy behind design. Harold has kindly been my mentor for some time now. We're in regular contact, and I'm sure Narelle does the same thing. Harold pointed out to us pretty early that that there was a bit more to design than tool sets and process. So that's that bottom right quadrant. Design doing is on the organizational axis, and it's a very concrete thing to do, and it's super attractive to healthcare managers and so forth who are in a hurry to get things done. Give me the toolkit, train me in that, and let me loose, and we'll be great at doing this. And we did that. We perpetuated it ourselves. We started doing training. But Harold came along and set us right and pointed to the fact that there were at least these 4 other areas that had to be developed. What is the nature of design inquiry? What skill sets need to be understood? Another friend of ours, Mel Snow, has written some excellent books on the design character, which I'm sure we can add if we haven't already. But she wrote 2 books, The Design, This Human, and there's a more recent one called Design Character, which is mentioned down the bottom left corner. And that was all about, actually we have to teach people what mindset to have to be good designers, and to not get tripped up by their science backgrounds, but to be able to step into what Harold argued was a third tradition in creation, which was, we had design is a very specific thing with some very specific qualities about it that don't exist in science necessarily and don't exist in the humanities. And what is that? And then we had the whole notion of design praxis, getting enough people in healthcare who actually knew enough to get things into action without messing it up and just getting caught up in tool sets. And how does that all fit? And I think all this applies to getting co-design right in health. Yesterday I decided I'd quickly mark the healthcare systems that I'm in touch with, which is a fair few, on where they've got with this. So doing and tool sets, fabulous, doing great. Design inquiry, skill broadening, etc., underinvested. So it's great to see you guys having these sorts of seminars talking about this stuff. Design character, I think it's barely on the radar, but it's so important. What sort of person do you need to be an ethical, quality, capable designer in the world? And we're not just talking about designers who went through a design school. We're now talking about people from all sorts of walks of life, and even the customers and the consumers trying to understand how to come at things. And design praxis, I do not think is sufficiently valued yet. We just don't see a lot of people broadly trained in design in hospital settings still. It is changing, and in some areas in the US, some European sites, etc., this has gone a long way, and it's really good to see. One of the things that Jean taught us very early was about process, and we sort of ignored this page in her book, but it was there all along. And the right-hand side is basically what I'd call George's the character that she made up. A guy with a fixed mindset working inside whatever system. He sees life as a test, not to look stupid, to fear any uncertainty, to avoid new experiences, to have a narrow repertoire, so he's very expert in things. And through that, he tried to understand data on stakeholders, so he's an analyst. He tries to find only a few ideas so he doesn't waste time. He manages risk through analysis. He places big bets slowly. He fails more often in new situations because he likes working in existing ones. And all that confirms that his mindset of not trying to look stupid is a really good one. Yet on the other side, as Jean pointed out, if we want to do design well, we have to start developing more Jeffreys. So what's Jeffrey? So for Jeffrey, life is a journey of learning. Therefore, he accepts uncertainty. He seeks new experiences. He builds a repertoire of skills that help him do that. He doesn't want to stay narrow. And because of that, he gets very interested in understanding stakeholder needs. So co-design will be of interest to him. He finds hidden opportunities, multiple ones, usually because he's very curious. He manages risk through action and change. He places small bets quickly, which is prototyping in the idea type model. He succeeds more often in new situations because of his outlook on life, and that confirms his cycle. And so this is all about developing the right design character as a person to stay open to design and co-design and listening to other people and being humble. One must be humble. Harold wrote this, and I'll read it because he sums things up so beautifully. And of course, everyone's pictures over some of it, so Lord knows what I'll read out of. But the choice of a designer makes as to how to acquire knowledge affects how his or her design is done. If the designer chooses to take a specific scientific approach, the whole design process will have strong similarities to a research process. This will limit or eliminate not only what is considered to be the preconditions of design, but also what is possible, what is needed, what is desired, and what the eventual outcomes will be. It will no longer be design. So I come from a science research background, so this was a complete anathema for me. I thought one had to approach everything through the scientific process, but I eventually learnt that there were differences, and Harold helped me find the way there with that. To fully benefit from co-design, we need to approach it through, I think, through systemic design framework. And I think this will add a great deal of power to what we're doing with co-design. One of the best sources of information on how to do that is the late, great Russell Ackoff, who is absolutely my hero. And he repeatedly pointed out that a lot of the panaceas where we name narrow things and we chase them for a while fail or don't do what we was expecting to do because they're not embedded in the systems thinking approach. He also made the point in 1974, long before anybody was excited about design thinking, that design would be the future of the systems methodology and the vehicle through which choice is manifest. And choice is manifest simply means we're giving people, stakeholders, choices to design their own life. And I think he was way ahead of the curve on that. So Russ taught me a lot of things, and they've all stuck in my mind, and not all of these are his, and I've butchered some of them, but I just want to briefly hit on them. How am I going for time out? I've got about 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, cool. Design is only a success if the customer consumer finds it to be so, no matter what the designers think. So I still meet designers. In fact, I had dinner with one the other day who said we came up with a beautiful design and they didn't finish implementing it. Well, it can't have been right because they didn't implement it. So, and we've got to remember that success is customer consumer related. Very recently, we were asked if we thought that we should start interacting with some of our patients through video calls in what's Monash Watch at Northern, and we picked 8 people who we'd had on the phone call contacts for a very long time, and we tried to put them through the now advanced video conferencing system. 8 out of 8 of these complex people completely had a terrible experience. So we didn't make the customer happy. We didn't make the consumer happy. The other point quickly to make is that in healthcare, the whole notion of who's a customer and who's a consumer is very confusing. Most of healthcare in the public sector is provided free of charge, and someone else makes the choice to give it to you. So they're the customer and you're the consumer as the patient. And government is also a consumer because they fund So they choose where the funds go to let other people dole it out. So this notion of custom consumer is very important. And you must design and co-design with both or you will fail. Performance of a system depends on how the parts fit, not how they act separately. This is a diagram by John Seddon from the Vanguard consultancy group. John's been interested in design and systems thinking for a very long time, and very much like Harold, has managed to mesh the two. This is a beautiful diagram because if you just read around the numbers, it picks up on so much that you have to think about when you're designing something. Purpose, what matters to customers, consumers, what's your demand response capability across the boundary that your organisation and touch point interactions with patients, processes. Remember, one stage we're all on about process design, and we completely forgot about most of the rest of it. System conditions, super important in health. Policy can stop you doing all sorts of good things. It's put patient watch model at risk a number of times because funding models have been changed to different types of models, and it's meant that innovations like using late telenavigators on contact calls with patients, which works terrifically well, becomes suddenly unfunded. So system conditions have to be designed and managed. And at the top of everything is management thinking. The mental models, the assumptions and everything that drive all our decision making. And one of the things that Seddon introduced was to drag managers, CEOs, divisional directors right down to the coalface and say, I will not do this job with you if you do not talk to these customers, consumers and your own staff who are interacting and providing the value at the front line. You need to see it because some of it's brilliant and some of it, your thinking is making it nearly impossible for your staff to deliver. To quote Don Campbell, who Narelle and I worked with, and I still work with Don over at Northern, he's a professor of medicine, we've got to make people's jobs doable, and co-design has to think about that. How do we make this person's job doable? In health, we still like to give you 5 computer systems and 3 screens to work on, and then we expect you to finish on time at the end of the day. And we do that to the youngest doctors in particular. So there's so many opportunities. Improvement must be directed at what you want, not what you don't want. Harold says there's a problem with problems. And it pretty much comes down to this. He's pointing out that just about everything we tackle, we start with saying, what's the problem, defining it, and how the heck we're going to deal with it. But if you read this, you'll see that he's saying this means that sort of wise action wisdom is starved of its potential. Wisdom specifically, which we call design wisdom, is a much richer concept than problem solving because it shifts one's thought from focusing only on avoiding undesirable states, problems, to focusing on intentional actions that lead to states of reality which are desirable and appropriate. That's a lot of words there, but you know, what's it saying? It's basically saying, do we want to step backwards into the future, getting away from problems, or do we want to actually think about what we wish we had? Ackoff designed a method to do this, which he used with very effectively. It's certainly in the back of my mind. It was in the back of Rel and my mind when we were doing it. And it basically, very simply, it's described in a book extremely well. Where will we end up if the system we're in is kept the way it is now? That's the motivator. And you've got to discover that, because nothing will change if it's not going to take you off the rails usually. Design the system that we should have now. Note the now, not futuristic. This is not designing for 5 years' time. This is an assumption that we design without constraint what we wish we had right now today, if we could have it, what we need, and stuff that already exists. And you've got to bust assumptions that are getting in the way of that, and you have to do co-design to get that right. And even though you're not going to get that idealistic design that you've come up with, you can start then on a journey of figuring out how to step iteratively towards it. And you can use the design process to do that. So, and that's a wonderful journey to go on with a co-design group as well, because they can see that you've got a clear vision about what you would like it to be today, but that you know it's not there. Continuous improvement is not clearly as important as discontinuous improvement. It requires creativity. Narelle covered this beautifully, so I don't need to take long on this slide. Basically, you can't run out and ask people what they want, because if they haven't experienced it yet, they will not know. When they did that with the early phones in a company called General Magic, most people on the street said, I don't want one of those, I don't need it. Watch the video, watch the documentary if you want to see it. You can see just how that absolutely killed that company. And it was very, very interesting documentary. Doing the wrong thing right is not nearly as good as doing the right thing wrong. Okay, that's a bit of a tongue twister. Does health do this? Well, yes. We keep talking about building bigger EDs. In fact, we've done lots of it to fix ambulance ramping problems. They're everywhere, not just in Adelaide, everywhere around the world. And the right thing is almost certainly designing upstream, downstream cause interventions. But we did it too late. It still needs to happen. But doing some of that is better than spending time and spending every cent on building bigger EDs and so forth. So we've tried to do some of that work. Design implementation is important as the design of product or service. We're coming into a period where AI in the next 10 years, 5 years, to 20 years, who knows exactly, is going to completely change the entire delivery of all sorts of things, including healthcare and everything else in society. How do we handle the complexity of co-designing, and how do we get the right design characters, not the billionaire, just want to get it out there people because they'll make a lot of money out of it. But how do we as a society want to work to make sure that we don't end up with even more billionaires and a whole bunch of people out of work? You know, that's a massive co-design exercise that we have to figure out how to get into. There's some signs of it, but not much. So I barely scratched the surface. I just wanted to leave you with one last thing that I found anchors me in the sea of complexity of all this. And it's from a video that the great architect, Christopher Alexander, who's now deceased. There's a good video on YouTube of this, but I just wanted to read this to you. And I started a very long time ago to take an orientation towards what is beauty and what is good. I advise, whatever the word is hiding behind there, I advise you to make sure that whatever you are deciding, doing, making, or any action you're taking, make sure that it has inner beauty. When you come to face with real beauty, it will change you, it will change the other people who are witnessing or thinking it, and they will take a different road. I know it seems almost trivial, but if you take this advice, it will change your life, because the small beauty is not a big thing, it's a huge thing. And to finish, this was feedback from one of our patients last week, because it's not hard to see when you're achieving inner beauty, when you talk to people, when you co-design with them. And this person gave us a very high rating and said that it's because of communication, warmth, caring, understanding, beautiful people. Without patient watch, I'm down. Then the call comes in, and with the friendly voice, which understands me, I look forward to the call every week. That's designing something that's got some inner beauty, I think. So health faces a lot of complex problems, a lot of wicked problems as well. And I think co-design enmeshed in systemic design remains our best bet moving forward. And on that note, that's one of Krista Alexander's great works, and I will unshare. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Keith. That was so interesting. And thanks, Narelle, as well. They're really fantastic presentations. You've both mentioned some nice little quotes throughout your presentations. I just wanted to see if anyone has any questions in the participants online, or any comments from the two presentations. They'd like to either put them in the Q&A or
And
yeah.
Christine, if anybody wants to reach out to me to have a chat about something at any point, I'm really open to that. So if the questions don't come to mind now and they do later, I'm very happy to chat. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, so I really like what you said, Keith, about how you know, like you've come from a scientific background. It's very rigid. It's very different to a design background where we think of it more openly and more creatively. And I think that's super important.
But the science is beautiful too.
It is absolutely, and it's important. Everything has its importance, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just Narelle saying to reach out as well. Yeah, so look, I think we will close the session. Someone on the audience says, very good challenge regarding how not to tack on co-design. It requires a different paradigm.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Ursula. Hi, Ursula.
Yes, I think, yeah, she was on the webinar today. And she mentioned she knows you. And I just think this was a perfect session to close the co-design series. There's another Q&A. And it was a perfect way to finalize the co-design series. I really like the observations made by Narelle and Keith. And for everyone who's on the webinar, if you have any questions or comments for the presenters, please feel free to reach out to HTSA or to them directly. We can connect you to them if you want. And I'll keep sharing some of the resources and that were mentioned, and I will post a content summary for the whole month on our socials tomorrow, and as well on our website. So any information that you the webinars that have been published for the past month will be available on our website, as well as a content summary. So I'm now.
Can I just say one last
thing?
Yes. I think Keith said it, and I think I did, but it's hard, messy work. And I just wanted to reiterate that at the end, because it feels like you're getting nowhere until you get sometimes the feedback, like Keith said on one of his last slides. And I'm sure I've got a couple more grey hairs as a result of doing the work at times, but I think.
Sorry, no.
Probably the day that I was trying to learn how to code. But I think if it was easy, like it's so cliche, it would have been done. But I think that it's really hard, messy work. And I think that the thing that I just wanted to sort of say as a final thing to say is, you've just got to keep trying to change the needle. Keith talked about doing sort of the next step, so that adjacent possible to what you're doing now, even though you know you really want to be over here, you might only be able to just move the needle a little bit. So I just wanted to really reiterate that it's tough, it's hard, it's challenging, and that's the first thing. Like, at least you're having a go at it versus doing the status quo.
Thanks, Narelle. Yeah, thanks, Narelle. That's a really good observation. So on that note, I'm going to close this webinar. Thanks for the participants. And if you want to share this webinar to anyone else, just let them know it's on the HTSA website. Our next series will be in August. We haven't yet decided what topic we will be covering, but please stay tuned. We'll be sharing that as soon as we start planning for it. And thank you very much.
Thank you
Please,
very much.
yes.
Thanks for having us.